Good evening, ladies. Back in the reading chair again as we go through this series on our quiet times. I wanted to follow up on the topic of Brian's video this week, which is wonder. And in chapter 7, on pages 97 and 98, he has a really good discussion of how living in a culture of consumerism is a real impediment to our capacity to stop and marvel and wonder at beauty wherever God reveals it. And one of the antidotes that he mentions to this consumerism that consumes us is gratitude. The intentional, conscious, and continual practice of gratitude. And so that's why I ask you to read Psalm 136 before watching this video. Psalm 136 begins and ends with a call to gratitude. 3 times in the first 3 verses, the psalmist says, "Give thanks to the Lord." And then he says it again at the very end of the psalm. And the reason for that gratitude is given 26 times in 26 verses. Every single verse of that psalm finishes this way: His faithful love endures forever. That is reason enough to be thankful. So I wonder what would happen in our experience of the Lord's presence, in our capacity to gaze upon Him in wonder and amazement this week. What would happen if we bracketed our days the way Psalm 136 is bracketed, in gratitude? What if we intentionally made Thanksgiving our first stop on our day's journey and our last stop at the end of the day? And what if we set a reminder on our phone, maybe at the top of every hour, to just remind us to stop and whisper or even shout, depending upon where we are, God's faithful love endures forever? How that might change our capacity to wonder. And then Brian touches on something that I think is really important for us to consider. And that is how consumerism has invaded and distorted the way we understand and practice worship. I want to share 2 phrases that sadly I've heard all too often in relationship to the practice of corporate worship, of worship when we gather together as the people of God. And I think both of these are cringe-worthy phrases. But I want to share them with you right now. One that Brian shared in the book and another one that I will add. And I just ask you to reflect. How do these all too common phrases reflect how consumerism has invaded our understanding of worship? Here's the first one. This is the one that Brian mentions. How many times have you heard people say, or maybe you have said, "I didn't get much out of worship today"? And I absolutely love Brian's little zinger of a response to that. He says, "Good. We weren't worshiping you." Don't you just love that? It is God who should receive something from our collective worship. It's a gift that we are offering to Him. As worship leader and songwriter Graham Kendrick reminds us, worship is not about a feeling that I get. Rather, it's a conscious act of the will, whatever my feelings, and maybe sometimes in spite of my feelings. God is the one who should be receiving something from our worship. And then here's the second phrase I've heard, and for me, I don't know about you, but it's like fingernails on a chalkboard when I hear someone say this: "I'm gonna get my worship on." I don't know, but that's wrong on so many levels, not least for what it reveals about a consumerist, me-centered approach to what happens when we gather for worship. And as Brian pointed out, One of the places where this seems to rear its ugly head most frequently is in sung worship, in our collective singing together. Personal preferences creep in there. That consumer driven, I want what I like, gets in there and is allowed to determine whether worship has been good or not. And the absence of my preferred style of music or my preferred genre seems to be sufficient reason to criticize musicians or worship planners. And then sometimes on the worship planning side, consumerism creeps in when songs that focus on I and me and our experience are allowed to crowd out songs that are lifting up God Himself, Father, Spirit, and Son. And the tragic result of all of this is that it blocks our capacity for wonder, our capacity to focus our gaze and our thoughts and our words on the God who is beautiful beyond comprehension, who is holy, 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 3 times holy, who is so far above all that we could imagine. So the questions this week are really diagnostic questions. As we look at our own approach to worship and our own practice of worship, first question, what are the aspects of my worship, the things I think about worship and the things I do in worship, that might need to come under the correction or the adjustment of the Holy Spirit? And then as I think about gathering with my faith family next Sunday or whenever the next time is that we will be gathered for worship, what is it that I can do that will offer authentic, God-centered praise during those times of corporate worship? So I pray that you'll keep thinking about this, that you will continue to embrace wonder, that you will continue to be on the lookout for the God who is worthy of our wonder, and that you will continue to guard against creeping consumerism in your understanding and your practice of worship. God bless you.